Hey everyone, it's Michael Zapersky, and welcome back to another episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. Today I'm here with Tess Sloan. Tess, welcome.
Hello. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. So Tess, you are the co-founder of 1111 Talent Collective, an HR consulting firm and recruitment firm that helps clients increase employee tenure with emotional fit screening. We'll get more into what all that means. And you've worked with some very well-known organizations, Mark Anthony Group, Mountain Equipment Co-op, MEC, Form, and a whole bunch of others. I'd love to get started and have you kind of share, before you even started 1111 Talent, what were you doing? What was kind of your educational background, and how did you get to this space of talent and recruiting?
Yes, yeah, for sure. So I'm born and raised in Melbourne, Australia. And in Australia, we, finish high school, then you go on to university if you so choose. I did that for a year and I was just not finding my groove. I really couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. And everybody around me was so clear. I had friends that were like, I'm going to be a chiropractor. I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be a doctor. And I remember just being like, oh my God, I have no idea what I want to do. And I was doing an arts degree at the time, which is like you do a bit of everything. So it wasn't helpful either. So in Australia, in particular, when you're not clear, they really encourage you to go abroad and take a gap year or do some traveling. And Australia is great in the sense that they make it really easy for you to get a visa in most countries in the world. So I decided to come to Canada for a year and just work, right? And do some traveling and exploring. So that was the plan. And so I arrived in Vancouver and I needed to get a job. So I went to a temp agency, a recruiting agency. And I said, hey, could you help me find a job? And they said, yeah, we're actually looking for, somebody here to help us with the front office. Would you do that? And I said, yeah, I'll take it. No problem. And a couple of days into the job, I remember looking back and seeing all the recruiters and saying, what are they doing? What job is that? That looks really cool. She's like, they're recruiters. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I can do that. Like they're on the phone all day, they're hustling, they're matching people with jobs, they're interviewing people, they're asking them about, what their skills are, their strengths, they're pulling out their like intrinsic motivators. And I'm thinking, this is what I do for fun. Like, I love this. Is this a job? I didn't know this was a job. And so, within a week, a recruiter had quit. So they gave me her desk. And I never looked back from there. Essentially, I inadvertently found my profession. So I started working agency recruitment, which is very, very high stakes. You're representing another number of companies. You're going through a lot of interviews. You're trying to find that right match. So you become really good at understanding what the right questions are to ask to really pull out the information that you're looking for in order to make that match. It can be, a bit transactional at a high level, which is where I started to get after a few years. I was like, oh, what happens after the candidate gets placed in that company? I got really curious about that part because I would have to wipe my hands of it and go back to the next, right? So I'd always wonder, how did they do? Did they get promoted? Did they end up liking it? And so I decided to go in-house. And at that time, Lululemon Athletica was doing their big expansion, and they had headhunted me and reached out to come and head up their recruiting team here in Vancouver. So I went over there and spent the next 6 years really learning and expanding and cutting my teeth in global recruitment. So that was a really exciting time. When I joined Lululemon, we were in 2 countries. By the time I left, they were in 19, and we'd grown the head office from 100 people to 1,000. So as you can imagine, a lot of learning, a lot of development. I got to touch a lot of different pieces, build a team, lead a team, grow a team, and really understand that full cycle of what does it take to, headhunt an individual, learn about what is motivating, what they're looking for, and then see them through the whole cycle and see how they do once they arrive.
When you look back to your time inside that recruiting firm, or that kind of temp agency, so you rose up from just doing some admin or whatever, entry level work to recruiting, and then to getting headhunted by Lululemon, which I think most people will be familiar, the global brand that it is today. What do you think you brought to the table from a mindset perspective, or commitment, or dedication, or work ethic? Like what made you unique, or not even unique, but just gave you an advantage to the point that a company like Lululemon actually wanted to headhunt you and bring you in? Like, what separated you from the other recruiters that maybe didn't have that same kind of opportunity or same interest in them?
Mm-hmm. You know, I think I had a real willingness to try something new. You know, I didn't wait until I had the education behind me or the experience behind me. I was just putting my hand up saying, I think I can do this. Like, give me a shot. I have potential, which is a loaded word because it's so hard to assess for. And we tend to want to see results first, right? But there is this whole sweet spot when we're hiring somebody, and how do we assess their ability to have potential and drive and ambition where they'll figure it out. And so I think I was willing to fail, right? And willing to just try new things until I found where my sweet spot was. But I had an inkling that, you know, from what I was seeing from this job, these were all the things I enjoyed doing. So I also focused in on what my strengths were. You know, like I didn't spend a lot of time trying to push myself in directions where I wasn't naturally strong, or I just didn't have that natural affinity.
I want to get into the work that your company is doing today, but before we do that, what would you say are really good, powerful questions that you can use to identify whether some, like essentially to call somebody on their BS? Like if a consulting firm owner is listening right now, joining, and they want to build their team, they want to bring in either contractors or full-time employees, but they want to get great people. And you know, what would you recommend if they're going to have that initial conversation? Maybe they go a whole bunch of applications through different sources, and now they need to start to try and vet those applicants. What is like a tried and true? What are the first couple of questions that you might ask that you feel like just really powerful in being able to identify, like, is this a solid candidate worthwhile to kind of go to that next step with?
Yeah, I think whenever you're in the position of interviewing and you're the interviewer, that your first mandate is, I have to create a setting where this person feels safe and comfortable so that they can express to me and answer the questions authentically and genuinely, and we both get what we need out of this. So whatever you can do to create that safety for somebody, because there is a imbalance of power that shouldn't really be there, and you don't get the best out of people when you play that up, right?
Right.
It's something that could be attractive for people to do. So automatically creating that safety, that comfort, that we're on the same ground. This is for you and me to get to know each other better. One of the questions
is that, sorry to interrupt, but is that just as simple as like essentially saying what you just said? Like, hey, you know, we're at the same, like, how would you position that? Because I want to get into the details so people can go, okay, yeah, I can actually use these exact words or something very similar to this.
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll say, you know, thanks so much for making the time today. And here's the intention of the conversation is for, you know, me to understand if you're going to be a great fit for this role, and for you to understand if our company and this role is going to meet your needs right now. And so really just saying that off the bat. So this is, we've both got a stake in this. And I'll also say, I'm going to lead the interview and have questions. I'm going to leave 15 minutes at the end for you, for your agenda, for your questions, right? And so when I interview people, I really encourage them to come with their own questions as well. So we're really creating that dialogue and conversation, and it feels like the playing field is more equal. Because I know for sure my job is, you know, a big part of the recruiter's job is to build rapport and to build trust really quickly so that this person is safe to share with you exactly, you know, what their strengths are, what their opportunities are, and we can both assess, is this going to be a good fit?
Right. And yeah, in terms of like great questions to be able to identify if somebody has, I know you said like potential is a hard word to really figure out, but like either from a positive way, like to go, yeah, this person really shines, as well as any red flags, questions that you tend to ask that you're trying to almost see, like, will they take the bait? And how do you think about those? Any kind of best practices there?
Yeah, I don't really ask questions where I'm looking for them to mess it up, but in every question that I ask, there are certain attributes that I'm listening for, right? I'm listening for, you know, how is their ability to handle ambiguity, or what type of level of resilience does this person have? And those are when we're asking more behavioral style questions, which are, how would you behave in this certain situation? So we'd give an example and say, walk me through what you would have done here. But one of the first questions I always ask, and that I love to ask, is what's important to you right now? Like, what's top of mind? Like, you're here, you're interviewing with me. Normally 9 times out of 10, that person is employed. They have a great job. I'm a headhunter, right? So I'm looking at moving talent around. And so I just ask them, what's motivating you to make a change? What's top of mind for you? And then I let them speak, because we have a lot of assumptions and biases around why somebody's making a move. Usually we assume it's money or title or status. It's rarely those things. And so it gives me a good indication of where that person's at and what's underneath, this conversation, why they're even here in front of me. And then I can start to paint a picture of the whole person, not just this person in the context of the title, the job, the salary, etc.
How big of an impact does salary have? And let me frame this for a moment. So take the consulting firm owner that wants to attract great talent to their organization, but they don't have the same budget for for talent that, let's say, Microsoft does, or any larger, more established organization. Sometimes people will hesitate. They don't even think that it's possible for them to try and get that higher level talent because they can't pay what that person is likely earning right now.
Right.
What's your experience show you on that? Is there opportunity for someone with a smaller kind of compensation budget to still be able to bring in great talent if they can't match that? Or how do you kind of think about that, and what's your experience been?
Yeah, my experience has been so varied. So I always, encourage people to stay in possibility, because Microsoft can offer you, sure, a big salary, big base salary, but you're also kind of, handcuffed there maybe for the next 3 years, and they own you from 9 to 6 p.m. And for a lot of people, that doesn't work. So they're willing to make sacrifices or make or compromise in other areas. So it might be they're willing to take a lower salary to work at home. Some of these bigger companies still or are asking people to come back into the office. A lot of people are not willing to do that anymore. So they're willing to take cuts otherwhere, in other places. It could also be around having, flexible schedules or work days. A lot of consulting businesses can actually be quite competitive with these bigger companies if they're working with individuals and giving them a cut of their fee. They can actually get a higher percentage there. And we're seeing this in our own business. And we're a retained headhunting firm. So that means we also are able to pay our freelancers and upfront, right? So, which is something that they wouldn't get. They're getting higher margins, they're getting paid quicker, and they have the flexibility that they need for their lives. Like, a lot of the people that we employ are mothers, are working parents, are people that are also starting their own business and wanting to kind of top up on the side. So we can get really creative around how we do this, and people are less drawn to working in the traditional structures now, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that creative mindset is so powerful. Too often people will put roadblocks in front of themselves, just saying like, yeah, I can't get that person, or I can't do this. But what you've just kind of demonstrated very briefly here, but it's really powerful, is that there's always opportunity. It just depends whether you're open to even exploring it. So I think that's a great reminder.
And we have to remember they're humans. They're like us. Like, you don't know what's going on for this person. They might have a sick parent at home that they actually want to stop working so long hours to be more available. So they're willing to, like, people have so many different scenarios going on, and we have to kind of open our minds up a little bit and say, why don't I just touch base and ask the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's dive into your company. So 1111 Talent, you have a partner in the business, Alicia?
Yes, Alicia Adams, yes.
So why do you decide to have a partner in your business and not launch this yourself?
Oh my goodness. Well, we both met at Lululemon. We were both working there, leading talent acquisition recruiting functions. And we both came up against a challenge. Alicia comes from a family of entrepreneurs, and she'd always wanted to open her own business and be an entrepreneur. She was very clear about that. And she was at these companies to learn and just gain experience. I never had that dream. I didn't have that vision. I'm simply somebody who, I really love working. I love growing these businesses. I also am a mother. I have 2 sons, and my sons were getting to school age around this time. And my big vision in life was I wanted to pick up my kids from school every day. I wanted to have a big career, and I wanted to be at the school at 3 o'clock and pick them up. And it sounds like, wow, that's your big vision in life. It really is, because I came from, I'd never had that. And I think I was somebody who really needed that. And I guess I just made a decision when I was a kid, like, when I'm a mom, I'm going to pick up my kids from school.
Right, yeah.
And so I couldn't figure out how to do that. I remember looking around, in these corporate companies, these global brands that I worked for, and I'd look up and the women that were executives were there till 8 p.m. at night. And I remember thinking, no, this is not for me. And I didn't want to compromise. I wanted to have a big career. I wanted to do both. And so when I met Alicia, I thought, hold on, if I have my own business, then I could just set my schedule, and then I could be at the school at 3. I could just block out that time in my calendar every day. So I just said, you know what, I'm in. Let's figure out how to do this. And together we built it over time together. So that's why I needed her. She kind of was part of the whole story for me and helped me bring it to life.
What's been the hardest part for you about having a partner?
Such a good question. I think there are times where we do see things really differently in terms of, sometimes we'll look at a work problem and we'll see them differently, but because our values are the same, we share the same core values as individuals. When we have differences, we're always able to interpret them as a positive, because she kind of looks at things through a lens that I don't see it, and vice versa. And then we're always willing to, one of us is always willing to, you know what, you seem to care about this way more than I, let's go this way. And it's always been quite even in, where we concede to each other, you know what, okay, yeah. And if we have a really strong opinion about it, we'll just get clear to it. At Lululemon, Lululemon, is famous or infamous around having these incredible personal development programs. They put their people through Landmark Forum, which is a really intense 3-day workshop. We got so much out of that in terms of how to communicate clearly, how to clear any differences, how to not hold on to any resentment, how to not take things personally. These things that we learned at our time at Lulu were foundational in how we run our business today. And so I credit a lot to it.
Yeah. Is there anything, even kind of looking back with the benefit of hindsight, that you go, if I was talking to, somebody who's looking to get into business with a partner, I would 100% recommend that they do X. Is there any big lesson learned in the kind of world of running a business with a partner?
For sure.
And I feel coming from a place where my cousin Sam is my co-founder at Consulting Success. We've built and run businesses over the years together. So I know that it's a bit of a big question, but what comes to mind for you in terms of definitely focus on this or do this?
Sit down and come up with your operating principles at the start, and do this when things are good, and ask the question, what will we do when things are bad? What will we hold each other accountable to, the way of being? So our ways of being are, we clear in the moment. If one of us says something that doesn't land for the other, we don't hang up the phone and go over it in our head or create a story. We actually stay on the phone or get back on the phone. We have a rule, you have 5 minutes to clear this. Okay. Yeah. And so we get back on and just be like, you know what, that didn't land for me. Can we do a take 2 on that? Because that didn't sit right, or whatever it is, but we do it in the moment. So then we're never holding on to anything. We're not building that resentment. We have another operating principle around, we have one around clearing in the moment. We have one around being direct, not taking things personally. And we have one called Prosecco, which is, we have these Prosecco moments. Once a week, we go have a drink together and we don't talk shop. We just talk about our kids, we have a laugh, and we have a glass of Prosecco, and we're just in the moment.
Nice. That's a good one. So you both worked at Lululemon. How did you, when you decided to go out and start this business together, where did your first few clients come from?
Yeah, so we built this business slowly. So we built it while we worked at our corporate jobs. We started it as a side hustle, and we started by building community. We would put on recruitment conferences in Vancouver where we'd bring the talent acquisition community together. We put on speakers for them, and we just built the community. We started to say like, hey, we're here, we care about the industry, we want to bring everyone together, and we were networking in that sense. And then after a while, as we were kind of building up the business, people knew us. So when we opened, they knew us, right?
Right.
And so, one of our first clients was Native Shoes. Lululemon is now a client, right? So we have some really great relationships, but we spent years cultivating those and fostering those and bringing them value without asking for anything.
Right. And so even when you're running those initial events, right, you still had your corporate jobs, but you were not, so you're hosting these events, but it sounds like you weren't actively pitching for business. It was more relationship building.
Yeah, it was just relationship building. And we saw a gap in the market where there were a lot of HR conferences, but nobody was doing conferences for recruiters. Recruiting and headhunting is a very interesting, nuanced role, because you kind of have this black book and you got to keep it to yourself because it's so competitive, right? Lulu recruiters against Amazon, against Nike, against, you're all going for the same talent essentially across the globe. And so what we did is we said, we want to turn this on its head. Once a year, we're going to come together. Everyone's going to open their black books and tell your secrets, tell your stories. How are you getting talent? And the one need we all had was we all needed to bring top talent to Vancouver, which was a bit of a problem at the time. And so people took to this because essentially people want to connect, right? We want to. And so the impetus was like, let's come together and like lift the collective. Like we'll all get better from this. Yeah. And so we put those conferences on for 2.5 years without being open as an agency, right? And that was because we were still figuring out what our business was, what our model was, what our key differentiator was. But it was important to start building community straight away and bringing them value, right? Not just community for community's sake, but actually bringing value. Like we wanted them to go back to their jobs the next day and be better.
Right. So fast forward, you're running these events, you decide, okay, we're now going to go full-time into our business. Those first few clients, did you just then call up the people that had come to your event, say, hey, we've now opened up shop like officially, or kind of walk me through that transition point and what do you do to kind of launch things?
Yeah, so we had a conference. Our last conference was, I think, at the Roundhouse in Yaletown. We had 300 people and we announced it then, we're going to be open. And Alicia and I, this is an important part of our story. We're both moms, we have families. We couldn't just quit our jobs and start our business, right? Like a lot of people are like, go all in, you've just got to do it. But we had mortgages. So we had to build this slowly. And nobody talks about that a lot, that's very conscious risk taking. Like we're going to take a risk. We're going all in our business, but it's going to take us 3 years to get to that point. And we had a number in our head where we actually had to be making from the conferences enough money so that our corporate jobs are paying us essentially. And once we got to that point, then we could go all in. So, we had a very conservative approach to this. And I want people to think about that, because you don't have to just burn the boats and go all in. You can do this over time, but you do need to have patience, right? It's a long. And so then when we opened, yes, we reached out to everybody that had come to our conferences and let them know we've opened up as a recruiting agency. Why, you ask, is there another recruiting agency? Does the world need another one? Yes. And here's why. Here's why we're different. Here's how we're doing things differently. Because during this time, we had been watching other agencies and really figuring out where the gaps were. And as internal recruiters being on the inside, we had experience working with agencies that were horrible. So we really wanted to address all of those issues.
So walk me through a little bit, because there are, lots of HR consultancies, a lot of recruitment consultancies or recruiting firms. How did you decide what to focus on that would be that kind of point of differentiation and competitive advantage, so that when you said to people, hey, we're here, we're now, you know, ready to take on business, that they actually cared and didn't just say, yeah, like, we're already good, we work with somebody, you know, currently. What was the secret sauce there?
We were really clear about that because, you know, we knew for sure the world doesn't need another recruiting agency. There were 300 in Canada. And so we were like, what's the difference? What's the edge? And when we worked as internal recruiters, which was the bulk of our career, if we hired somebody and it didn't go right, we had to answer to the CEO or the founder. And so we had to get it right. Like, we had to figure out, you know, what is the difference between headhunting somebody to start at Lululemon and this person succeeding or this person bombing, because we had both experiences, right? So we had to figure that out really quick. So when we opened, we said, these are our pillars. We immediately set up a global team, and we opened 6 years ago. So we have recruiters in our key markets, which are Vancouver, Toronto, LA, New York, and Sydney, Australia. And then we base all of our recruiting on data and metrics. So every Friday, when you're engaged in a search with us, every Friday we send you a report, and it's the data and metrics from your specific report. Because we knew for sure when we worked with agencies, sometimes we'd not hear from them for months. And we're like, what are you doing? We just paid you 20 grand. Where are you? And so that felt like a real gap. So we developed really strong recruiting metrics and data, and we feed that to our clients on a weekly basis. And then the other one was DE&I. So when we opened 6 years ago, we saw DE&I recruitment as a real opportunity. So we hired a consultant who worked with us really closely through each step of our recruiting process. This was 6 years ago. So before this was even on trend or, you know, something people were talking about. And we're actually engaged with a new DE&I consultant right now, because it had been 6 years since we'd done that. So she's doing a complete audit of our process. So I think it's one thing to say, you know, we're diverse, but, you know, we really put in the work in this, where we're all developing, learning, and we're hiring professionals to ensure that our process is really at the forefront of DE&I recruitment. And then, so it's global team, data metrics, DE&I, and then we're starting to share our results. So we have really high retention rates in our placements, and we're starting to feed that data out as well.
And when you, so I mean, that sounds like, yeah, you're very clear on what you were bringing to the table that was different from the standard recruitment firm. How did you communicate that? Was that just on one call? Was it a call and a follow-up email? Did you like, because there's a lot of information in that, and I would imagine that the potential buyer and client on the other end could not really digest all that in just one quick go. Maybe they could correct if I'm wrong. I'm just wondering, like, how did you continue to really push those areas of advantage, differentiation, so that the marketplace like really understood what made you different compared to everybody else?
I think we just talk about it constantly, right? So, you know, we have a podcast, we talk about it. It's in all of our email communication to our clients. It's in our pitch deck. It's in our newsletter. It's in our social media. We have a really robust social media on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and we're just constantly talking about it, especially because these are our competitive advantages, and they're proving to be successful.
So take me to today from a marketing perspective. What are you all doing now? And you can even take me back, you know, pre-COVID times. I'm wondering, it sounds like initially the events and the conferences were big. You're doing social or active on social media channels. Is there anything else that you would say, yeah, like we do this or these things, and they really contribute to being able to attract great clients for our business?
We are very purpose-led in the sense that we communicate what we're purposeful around. And so for the last few years, when COVID hit, you know, we got even clearer on this, so that we are really unafraid to attract our clients and repel the ones not meant for us. We don't want to play in the middle. We don't want to be for everybody. But if diversity recruiting is important to you, we're the firm to work with. We we created a contribution philosophy where we're really going after the gender pay gap, structural inequality, so women in leadership positions, and we're doing a lot of education around that. We're contributing to organizations monetarily through that. And so we're talking at a lot of events around that. And we're getting on the radar of companies who are like-minded, purposeful, and want to make an impact greater than, your revenue for that month, right? So that's what we're after, and that's what we're talking about. And I think it's a really interesting place to be at as a business when you are good with repelling clients that are not meant for you.
So tell me more about that, because I mean, was that an easy decision for you, or was that something that you struggled with? Because it sounds like you were and still are intentionally not trying to get certain kinds of business, and therefore for some that would be a scary decision, because it sounds like, well, there's a potential market that we're not going to go after. If we really only narrow in, if we only kind of focus on this one thing, aren't we going to lose other opportunities that could come our way when just a company needs a good recruiter? And that's, you're like, well, that's not really, we don't really do that. We focus on these kinds of, as you said, more purpose-led, high growth businesses, I think is what your website says, right? So was that an easy decision, or that's something that kind of evolved over time?
It definitely evolved over time, and it was a process, because like any new business, there was a time where we would take anything and everything, and we just learned the hard way, right? We learned that we don't want to work for unethical businesses. We learned that we're a retained search firm, and we had a really cool client that was like the coolest like company of the moment, and they refused to pay our retainer, and we took it on anyway, because we thought, we'll do it, we'll succeed, and then we'll get paid, everything will be fine, they just need us to prove ourselves. It was a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare, and we'll never do it again. It was one of the last times where we kind of drew a line in the sand, and we were like, no more. Like this is our craft. We've been doing this for 16 years. How dare they not pay us? Like, this is our model and what we're saying. But it took from us the level of, like, we had to develop in ourselves also that sense of like worthiness, right? That's a big part of business, and how clients receive you, and when you stay, we had to develop that in ourselves. So much of being an entrepreneur is your own self-development, right?
Yeah, certainly.
And so that's an evolution, that's a process. And I'm seeing that again now, because I mentioned this to you, I founded a new business, Chapter 2 Meditation, where bringing meditation and mindfulness into businesses and companies. And right now there's this opening where companies are really receptive around this idea of mindful performance. How do we support the whole human being, from mental health to stress, anxiety, burnout? And meditation is really on the cutting edge of being able to address these issues. But I'm kind of back now at square one in this new business, coming up against a lot of this old stuff, where I'm really having to catch myself and say, okay, hold on. What are my fees here? How do we structure this? What are the clients I want to work with in this space?
I think you're in a really unique place in terms of the work that you do, because one of the greatest challenges that consultants and many people in business have, especially in the kind of professional services space, is prospecting. It's outreaching, getting in front of new prospective clients you want to build relationships with. You almost have to do that on two fronts, right? You have to do that, one, to attract clients that would be buyers of your services, recruiting or meditation in their organization, but also you have to do that to other executives or leaders that you want to headhunt, right, to bring in for those clients. Is there anything that you learned in how you reach out to somebody that you don't yet have a relationship with yet, that you find allows them to like lower their guard and tends to get you a higher level of response? Because so often people will just reach out with like, hey, here's what we do, or it's very one-sided and doesn't seem to get a good response from people. So what have you kind of learned about that initial outreach to somebody you don't yet have a relationship with yet?
Okay, great. And can everybody answer this question? Because I want to hear everyone else's answer. I'm still learning. But I think what I'm finding works best is getting a warm lead or an introduction. And sometimes it's uncomfortable to ask somebody like, hey, could you introduce me to so-and-so? But those ones are the best, right? When you have a referral when you have somebody kind of saying, hey, we worked with Tess in 1111, I'd love to introduce you, I can see you during hiring, those are such a good entry because it's just warmer. It's better than going in cold. But sometimes we do go in cold, and if we do that, we've always researched their business and decided this is a perfect fit for us. We want to work with them. And so we'll share a bit about that, why, and try to add them some value. Or we currently see that, the business is going through this. Here's an article I found on it, or, I'd love to discuss this further. So, giving them something to think about and then following up.
Right. You're not doing the pray and spray approach of just here's a whole bunch of 50 or 100 or 200 people all at one time with the exact same message. You're actually spending a bit of time to do your homework, to research, to understand what's going on in their world, and then making your initial kind of touch point very customized and hopefully very relevant to them. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Makes a huge difference. I want to shift for a moment to your pricing strategy, because you said that you're very intentional with how you engage with clients. You got burned once where you had this, amazing from a public perspective company, very well known or whatever it might be, kind of the latest one, but you did not move forward, or you engaged with them without your standard approach to pricing, which is a retainer model. So can you talk a little bit about what your current structure is for pricing? And then I'm also very interested to know, how's it changed or evolved over time?
Yeah, so we started as a retained search firm. We still are to this day. We've made exceptions in that. And retained search firm means we take 20% off the annual base salary, which is a really standard in the industry. 50% of that is due upfront, 50% upon closing.
Yeah.
And so what we come up against in the industry is a lot of recruitment agencies are contingent, which means they work for free until they make that placement. What we observe in that model is that it motivates sloppy, shitty behavior. It motivates the idea of a recruiter as a used car salesman, because they're just throwing stuff at you and hoping something sticks so they get paid. So we wanted to remove that energy out of the equation, that whole mindset out of the equation. You're hiring professionals. We're then going to hire the best recruiters in your market to do the search. And then we're going to provide you with top talent. And so when you hire a search firm, your biggest concern is, I don't have the time to do this. Recruiting is so high volume and tedious. Nobody wants to do it. And so that's why you hire a search firm. So then we present you with, here's the top 3 candidates on the market, where if you're not working in that model, you're going to get, you might as well have been doing it yourself, right? It's not a good use of anyone's time. And so we really believe in this model, just more so from a mindset perspective. You're just going to get better quality, and it's going to make the best use of your time. And so our pricing is really flat. It sometimes fluctuates if we have, different scenarios. During COVID, we found that in 2020, a lot of companies press pause on hiring. And so we had to come up with something to address that. And so we moved to a flat fee model where we knew budgets were constrained, but they still needed some people, or they needed to pivot roles. It was like, hey, we need to let go of these roles, and we actually need to hire somebody in e-com or digital to adapt to the new environment. And so we created some custom programming during that time, but now we're back to our normal business. But, the biggest takeaway from me, my biggest learning around fees, around pricing, is you've got to get behind it. You've got to believe it. You've got to see the value in it, really, before you go out there and say what your pricing is.
Is there a minimum level of kind of salary that you would, so let's just say if the person's salary is 100,000 base, so your company's fee would be $20,000, 10,000 of that paid up front, 10,000 successful hire of that person, or engagement of that person. With that model, have you ever thought about making, or I was gonna say, is there a base ever of that? So would you, if somebody was going to look for a position of a $50,000 person, would you even take that? Or is there a minimum in terms of when you say yes to a client or no to a client, because the value of that for you is only 20%, is really what I was getting at.
Not really, but our expertise and what we're hired for is executive search. So usually director level and above. So you're not going to see those salaries there. But sometimes we're working deep within a one company
Right.
on their executive work, and they have something come up at that level that they want us to take care of. We absolutely do it.
Got it.
Right?
Okay.
We
So
have
the
a full
focus is
range.
being very clear on executive levels. So that's going to almost always be a six-figure salary or,
Correct.
and beyond. Got you. Okay. Makes sense. Have you learned anything about just a couple of questions here before we wrap up? I know you said you have recruiters in different markets around the world. Anything about like building your team and expanding and bringing people on? Is that like the model that you've selected? Like now, in order for you to grow, is it just about adding more recruiters, or once they start reaching capacity, kind of how do you think about expanding and scaling and growing your company?
Mm-hmm. We started 6 years ago, and our goal was to untether our workforce. So we really love this idea of remote workforce pre-COVID. And so we are sticking to that because it allows us to live our lives the way we want to live them, with a lot of freedom and flexibility. And we want that for our people too. And so, we have recruiters across the globe, and then we have a core HQ team, which we keep, as lean as possible. There's 4 or 5 of us.
Okay.
And so when it comes to scaling and growing, I think, with the recruiting team, we'll expand that because that allows us to be really impactful, dangerous, really strong on the recruiting side. So that's where we
Right.
would really see the most value in
Well, that's
scaling.
also kind of where your revenue generation is coming from, right? Like you would only add more recruiters if you knew that you would be able to generate more revenue and therefore more profit.
Yeah,
And yeah, okay.
exactly. And so our core HQ team, we keep really lean, and we have highly skilled individuals that are real generalists and are able to, touch a lot of things and do a lot of
Yeah.
things. But I would say, when it comes to recruiting remotely or hiring your team remotely, we just have, communication is key. We have weekly, daily communication touch points. So we're all on the same page, all working towards the same thing. So that means for us, we can hire the best talent wherever they are in the world.
So you have 2 sons, you're running 2 businesses. Talk to me about meditation, because how do you fit it in is really my question. Like what is your schedule for meditation, and how do you how much time do you spend on it? Just how do you think about it, or bring it into your life so that it actually has a real impact for you?
Yeah. So I'm really passionate about, talking and teaching meditation in a way that brings it from something out there where we visualize, like, you have to be like on a cliff in this perfect Instagrammable moment, which nobody has time for, or you have to go to an ashram for 3 months in India. Like, no. How do we bring meditation into our day-to-day lives? So for me, on a daily basis, that might look like, if I wake up before my kids, I might sit in meditation for 10 to 15 minutes. If I don't, I go on a walk every day. That sometimes is my meditation. So while I'm doing that walk, I leave my phone at home, I leave my AirPods at home, and I just breathe. And I just actually get in contact with my breath. So meditation is conscious connection with your breath. So whenever you are breathing intentionally and breathing deeply, that is meditation. And so sometimes my meditation is in between Zoom calls. I'll close my eyes and I'll take 3 diaphragmatic breaths, and then I'm ready for my next call. And there's a lot of quality research around how this autonomy of our nervous systems is directly linked to high performance, not just in our careers, but in every aspect of our lives, right?
Yeah.
And I came to meditation at a very painful chapter in my life, and I discovered it then, and it was really transformative for me in the way that it helped me get back on my feet, navigate, the situation I was in, parent, keep working, do all of these things. So I then went and became like a certified meditation teacher. I was really passionate about bringing this to people before a rock bottom moment, like, it's so much easier to learn to meditate before things are hard.
Is there anything, and feel free to just to say no, we can move on,
Yeah.
but is there anything you can share about that time of kind of what you were going through, what you were experiencing, so that others
Yeah.
can kind of put that in a bit of context of like how it helped you kind of get
Yes.
past that, or
Yeah.
move through that time?
Yeah, so I was going through a separation in my marriage, and it was just um, that time in my life was just so devastating on so many levels. I have two children. Nobody gets married thinking that it's not going to work out. And, it's a time where all of your core beliefs are just kind of brought into question and are, you really have to reckon with yourself, and you have to also hold a mirror up to yourself and ask yourself some really tough questions and
Mm.
really go within, and you actually don't have to do this, right? You could actually go on the run from it and numb it out and party and drink or whatever, right? We all have our coping mechanisms. And I think at this point in my life, I really decided like I have to face this head on, and I actually need a tool to support me in navigating this. And that's when I turned to meditation. And I had grown up with a mother who meditated every day. So I was familiar with the practice, but hadn't really done it myself. And so what I noticed was that meditation got me through this hard time, really hard time. And simultaneously, it unlocked for me my next level of performance, which I wasn't expecting to happen. And
Mm.
so my business quadrupled that year. I noticed how I was showing up as a parent, as a friend. The relationship I have with the father of my children is something I'm so proud of. We're still such a unit and a family. And I think that through meditation, mindfulness, I really learned how to manage myself and my own emotions and hold more space for others and in focus. Like meditation improves our brain, our ability to focus. So when I do, people say to me, how do you do it all? But I feel like I have so much time and
Mm.
flexibility, and I only do things that matter to me. And that's, chapter 2 meditation, 11:11, my children and, my family. So it's easy. It's not, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's, thank you for sharing that. So one final question before we wrap up here for today. In the last 6 months or so, what would you say is a book that you've either read or listened to, can be fiction, nonfiction, just something that has really resonated with you, that you've enjoyed, that you might recommend to others?
Yeah, I'm reading right now. I have a few books on the go, but the one I want to share is called The Daily Stoic. It is by Ryan
Ryan
Holiday.
Holiday, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you read a page a day, and it's like it's dated. So for every day you just read that paragraph. You can get it on Amazon. It'll be at your house tomorrow. And
Yeah.
it's philosophy, and it will give you the Stoic philosophy and then a modern day interpretation of it. So it's very the same principles as meditation and mindfulness, but just learning how to not go into our like habitual behaviors, like getting angry or when we're driving, honking. It's just like it teaches us to pause in those moments and go within and be like, what's going on for me right now? And the more people we have operating from that way, right? The better our world is, the more successful we all are, the healthier communities we have, healthier people, healthier kids, right? And um, it's the work of a lifetime, going
Yeah.
in, exploring, evolving. So I highly recommend that book, and it's so easy to read.
Well, Tess, thank you so much for coming on here today and spending some time with us and sharing a bit of your story. We'll have all of your company and links and kind of set up in the show notes so people can learn more about you and your company and everything that you have going on, and check you out on social platforms as well. If there was one place that you might suggest, if people do want to learn more about the work that you're doing, what would be the one kind of link or social platform that you would suggest them connecting with you on?
I would say my Instagram is Tess at chapter 2 meditation. Yeah.
Okay.
And then you'll get a roundup of 11:11, chapter 2, my kids' pictures who are adorable. Good little insight.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks again, Tess.
Thank you so much.